Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Kids Cancer Therapy Toolbox podcast. Our guests today are Matthew, Marley, and maybe Nobby. So, would you like to start by introducing yourselves?
Sure. Well, thank you, Anna, and also my thanks to Charles for inviting us to do this. It's really an honor anytime that we get to speak about our work. So thank you. My name is Matthew. I'm a neurosurgery resident currently. I ha had we both my wife and I both have MD PhDs from the University of Colorado. We've both been grant funded by the NIH previously. My work primarily is in the neural correlates of higher cognitive functions like executive function currently. But I also co-founded the CCTDI with Charles many years ago.
Hi.
Mhm.
So my name is Marlie. I am Matt's wife. As Matt mentioned, we're both MD PhDs. I currently am a plastic surgery resident at the University of Colorado. My work primarily now is on clinical outcomes in reconstructive surgery. But prior to that, in my thesis years, I worked on a transcription factor mutation that predisposes kids to thrombocytopenia and leukemia.
That's very cool. Is there a reason why you chose Colorado? Is that just how things turned out?
Well, Colorado is home for me. So I grew up around Colorado, went to University of Colorado Boulder for undergrad. And because Colorado was home to me, I really was interested in staying for the duration of the MSTP, an 8-year training program. I wanted to be home and, with my family and having that support. And luckily, that's where I met Matt, the love of my
Mhm.
life.
We're Colorado.
And yeah, and so we've made Colorado our home for, at least the foreseeable future um, for our training.
Yeah, Colorado is not home for me. Chicago was home for me, but Colorado was the first home for the CCTDI. And at the time, I was planning on going to medical school actually at OHSU. I was a resident of Oregon at that time. I hadn't lived in Colorado long enough to be a resident. And the out-of-state tuition at the University of Colorado is very expensive. And so I threw in an application for MD PhD, they're the MSTP. And at the time, I thought I needed a PhD like I needed a hole in the head. I really had no interest in doing a PhD at that time. I had done so many years of research with Charles at that point that I felt like I had my research background was fine. I didn't need more research experience. But nevertheless, I put in an application almost last minute, I must say, to the MD PhD program at the University of Colorado, and a week later got an invite, and then eventually got an acceptance and stayed just because I thought it would be a good opportunity to retrain. So I joined the MSTP at the University of Colorado and did a PhD that's quite different than my work at the CCTDI.
Very cool. It's almost like it was fate.
You could certainly say that. In fact, Marley and I really feel like we met our perfect complement. I would say that she excels in areas that I don't necessarily excel in, and we complement each other in very nice ways. And this is all on the internet, by the way. You can look this up. But she was the only person in the anatomy lab with me at 4 a.m. studying. So that is pretty much where it all started.
Yes. So, my first official question is, why do you personally believe that curiosity is so valuable?
Well, when Charles had pitched this idea of doing this podcast about raising curious kids, and I went on a run a little bit later that day, And I was thinking about this, and curiosity, I think, is something that children have naturally. They want to learn about the world. They want to understand things. They're trying to learn as much as they can, and the whole world is novel to them. So curiosity is sort of their baseline. I don't think that you have to teach them to be curious. As I joke that when we had our daughter Navi, that I thought children were much more of a blank slate, that you could sort of form their personalities and their interests. It didn't seem to be the case, at least with our little one. She kind of came preformed from the factory with her own temperament and her own interests, and you can guide those things a little bit. But the thing that you can the thing that you really can do as a parent is give them their inner voice. The voice that they hear in their head when they're struggling. And so when I was on this run, I was thinking about Navi is curious. All children are curious. You don't have to teach them to be that way. I think that they want to learn about the world and understand what's going on around them. Uh, and they're creative quite naturally as well. And I think as far as curiosity goes in relation to raising children to be artists or scientists, I actually think that you should raise them to be creative first and to continue to approach the world uh, as an adult, to take something from them and to approach the world with your own childlike curiosity. Children look at everything as an exploration. If you don't teach the kids not to stand on the coffee table, they'll stand on the coffee table. They learn not to stand on the coffee table. But you could stand on a coffee table, I suppose, and use it in some way that you haven't thought about. But that's really, I think, the thing that's most important, at least for our daughter, is that I always emphasize to her that you're an artist first, that you should continue to be creative, approach everything in a creative manner, and then I think that if you have this baseline level of curiosity and creativity, then I think you find your path, and in science there's no there's no real right way to do science. There are tools and there's a method, but the insights very often come in unexpected ways. One of my favorite discoveries or stories of the development of something is the Swan's Gans catheter, which is a catheter that surgeons put into the heart to measure intracardiac pressures. The idea for the Swan's Gans catheter came from one of those gentlemen, Swan and Gans. One of them was looking out at boats and buoys floating in the ocean. And that sort of insight, that sort of creativity, that's the real secret sauce to doing great science.
Yeah, I didn't think about the creativity part of that, which is really interesting, that you talked about like art, considering your background with so much science.
Well, my background actually, I've made quite a lot of art in my life and continue to make art in various mediums. And when I joined the CCTDI, I didn't have any knowledge of when I actually joined Charles's lab before we co-founded the CCTDI. I had no business in a scientific lab. I didn't know how to do a Western blot. I barely knew how to use a pipette. And Charles and I are brothers in this way, that he noticed some drive and some creativity and some ambition to say, well, why can't I learn how to do a Western blot? That's the easy part. The hard part is asking the right questions and having insight. And that's something that's difficult to teach, but you can teach anyone to do a Western blot. You can teach them the scientific method. It's very difficult to teach people to find or maintain or enhance their creativity over their life if you've spent your whole time saying, don't be so creative, don't stand on the coffee table.
Definitely. So, kind of on the other hand, how have your mentors inspired you?
Well, Charles and I, so his mentor was Mario Capecchi, who won the 2007 Nobel for transgenic mice. And he would say to Charles that you should do 80% of what I tell you and 20% of what I explicitly tell you not to do. And Charles jokingly said about me that I did 80% of what he explicitly told me not to do and 20% of what he told me to do. Um, Charles perhaps had the biggest impact on my scientific trajectory just by giving me enough leeway to be in the lab in the middle of the night by myself, designing experiments, taking my ideas to one of the senior scientists in the lab and saying, "Does this make sense? How is this? How are these controls? Is this the right way to ask this question?" And he didn't really ever stop me from doing that. And a lot of the work that we did, and very often still, I think the CCTI is founded on this idea of you should have bold ideas, you should have off the wall ideas, and all of that is perfectly okay. And there's also a role for just doing the things that you know will answer the questions that are important, but you should also have at least 20% of what you're doing should be pretty radical and bold and innovative.
Yes.
Well, I think for me, in a lot of ways, I started my scientific career kind of on the opposite side, where like I knew how to pipette, I knew all the tools, I could execute them, but I had never really been given a lot of leeway to drive my own project. And one of my mentors along my thesis career path um, ended up taking a job at a different institution about halfway through my thesis years. And he continued to support me and continued, to be a really big cheerleader for my project and for my career overall, but from afar. And I think in a lot of ways, that was kind of the push that I needed to unleash a lot of my own curiosity and my own creativity. Um, and I think that that was a really big turning point for me was really feeling that I was in the driver's seat at that point for my project and, you know, being able to put together a really cool story to be able to publish a thesis. Um, and in so many ways, I find that to be one of the biggest ways that my mentor inspired me by kind of giving me the reins and saying, all right, you've got this now. Um, so I think for me, it's almost a flip that you started off with all the creativity and less of the skills. I started off with the skills and had to develop the creativity as I went. And thankfully, I had you by my side cheering me on too.
Well, I have said, and it's probably a crude overgeneralization, but I've said to Marley about scientists that there are scientists who are driven by a problem. They have a problem that they're interested in, and they're aiming at something very specific, solving a problem, understanding a mechanism. And then there are scientists who you could put anything in front of them, and they would be interested in that problem just because they're interested in the process of discovery or the creative element of doing science. I certainly count myself among the latter, and of course that's an overgeneralization. There are lots of different types of scientists, but broad strokes, I think that that's pretty true. Charles is like this as well. This is why the Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute focuses on basically every childhood cancer that's ever existed. He's just interested in a whole bunch of different things. And he has the tools to answer questions in a lot of different domains. In fact, the scientists who really pioneered what we know as modern day molecular biology, they were really physicists. And now in neuroscience, a lot of the people who are doing the most pioneering cutting edge work are engineers and computer scientists. They're not neuroscientists. So very often you have these people who have an orthogonal tool set who come in and have different insights and approach different problems from a unique angle, and that's where you really generate great insights and discoveries. So I think that the if you have regardless of how you come to it, either from the creative side or from the scientific side, if you always just approach a problem in a creative way, I think that is always where the interesting things happen. Children do this quite naturally. Everything that you put in front of them that's new for them, you'll always be surprised at what trouble they can get into with that. And over time, you sort of try to shape their behavior to stop making so many messes. But there is a balance. You have to let the creative process is messy. You have to let kids be messy and discover things for themselves, and don't take that childlike creativity out of them, and so that they continue to have that for the rest of their life. As Marlie was saying, that I come to science more from a creative artistic side. So I had no problem walking into my PhD mentor's office and saying, "Hey, I want to do electrophysiology and behavior. I have no knowledge of how to do this at all. I don't even know the underlying scientific principles that go along with basic electrophysiology. Can you teach me?" And having that confidence and just saying, like, I can figure it out. I'll figure it out, and I might have some interesting insight because I'm not in the field, because I'm coming from outside of the field, is a huge benefit for science, and that's certainly what we try to teach our daughter, is that creativity is the most important thing, creativity in everything, and to really try to maintain uh, space around her creativity as much as we can.
Definitely. So, Matthew, what did your Buddhist learnings contribute to your early career and current outlook, along with how you both plan to raise Navi with perspective and optimism?
Oh yeah. So I wear these. I wore these for years and years and years and years, and they're basically mala beads, and I wear them as a reminder to be mindful throughout my day. Mostly because they annoy me. I fidget with them, and I'll hit them on things, and it's really my reminder in those moments where it's falling down my wrist. It's annoying me to take a mindful minute or a breath or be present in that moment. I wore these for years, and this sounds like a question that Charles himself asked you to to ask me. But so my when I was 18 years old, I did Vipassana meditation. I went on a retreat. It was up in Pecatonica, Illinois, just some very rural spot in northern Illinois. Did a 10-day retreat learning Vipassana meditation in noble silence, which is 10 days of no talking. You don't interact with anyone. It's very isolating. And it's isolating because you're meditating 16 hours a day. And longer. Some people did it longer, but you're from 4 a.m. until you go to bed at 8 p.m. Every minute of that is meditation. And if there's a meal, you try to have that meal as mindfully as you possibly can. And that's an incredibly difficult retreat. If you've ever tried to stop talking for even a day, it's nearly impossible. And as part of that retreat, you still have to do chores, and so you learn how to interact with people without talking to them, and just trying to be mindful of everything that's going on around you. I did it in part because my father said that's a cult, you should not do that, and so part of it was in spite of my father. I said, well, now I'm definitely going to go do that. But what it was a great gift to myself when I was 18 years old. I've had an active meditation practice basically since that time in one way or another. And um, the foundations of our parenting sort of arise from this Buddhist idea that um, the suffering the suffering or the pain that you feel in your life very often doesn't come from outside of you, but it's caused from within you. And so you can't change external things, but you can change your relation to external things internally. I was telling you that story earlier about Navi, and how you can give a child their voice, and the things that they hear in their hardest moments, those things can come from you. And so we read this book to her for years when she was growing up called Elmo is Mindful. And it's this very sweet book where the Sesame Street characters confront some challenge in their life. And there's this one challenge where Big Bird is on roller skates and he's trying to learn how to skate backwards and he keeps falling down. And Big Bird, he falls down and he says, I can't do this. And then Grover comes over and says, you can't do it yet. And Navi was playing piano, not a couple of weeks ago. And we say this all the time. If she says, I can't do it, we say, yet. You can't do it yet. And she was having a hard time. She was learning this piece for her recital, and she slams her hands down on the piano and makes a big crash. And she goes, I can't do it. And then there's this pause, and you just hear, and she goes, "Yet," and it was in there, and so what our foundation for parenting Navi is twofold. And some of this comes from Buddhism. One is that we don't discourage creativity, we encourage it. Um, Children are messy by nature. We try to say, like, there's space. You can be messy, you can be experimental, you can cause trouble. It's okay. And then the other part of is giving her this voice where there's no challenge that's going to arise within her. There's no feeling that somebody else can give her that she can't use her mind to change her relationship to. And so very often as kids start going to school, they hear bad things from their classmates. Oh, that I don't like your dress. Oh, you didn't do this well, you didn't do that well. And whenever we talk to Navi about that, we frame it in a very Buddhist way. Like, those are things that are coming from outside of you. You can't control what other people say, but you can control your reaction to them. And you can say, well, I don't believe that. And the voice in my head says, I really like this dress, and that's the most important thing. And I don't have to be upset about other people. And then we talk about how other people, very often when you have negativity coming from other people or other things, that has very little to do with you. And so some of these Buddhist principles about changing your relationship to things, being present in the moment, focusing on um, the journey and not the end goal. In fact, one of the things that we say to Navi all the time is perfection is not the goal. Whenever she's working on something, in fact, very earlier today, I said something to Marlie about, like, oh, that's perfect, just a offhand, saying that you would say. And she said, Dad, perfect is not the goal. So this idea of life being a journey, that you're going to experience negative things, people are going to do bad things to you, bad things will happen, you will suffer, only as much as you suffer within your own mind. These are things that we definitely try to impress upon her. And over and over and over again, I tell her that the world is good, the world is safe, you are safe. Most people are doing their best, and that is true. And with that optimism, you very, very, very infrequently find yourself defeated or on the ropes. Not never. Especially Marley and I know that better than anyone in residency, especially surgical residency. You find yourself pretty defeated a lot of times, but the amount of time that you're wallowing is very short. That's critically important. It was critically important when Charles and I started the CCTDI, because, man, we had so many problems. And if you say, well, we haven't done it yet, well, we haven't done our first experiment yet, as opposed to we're never going to do our first experiment, just that framing changes everything. You say, well, there's a shorter term goal that we can look at, and you get momentum in that way. We were just at the Sand Dunes National Park, and we were walking down this very long sand dune, and it's was quite was it was the resistance of walking on sand. It's hard. It was a long walk on sand, on very hot sand. And Navi was really struggling. And Marley said, "Well, here's what I do. Look at this rock. Let's make it to that rock." And then they'd walk to a rock that was only a few steps from them. And then they'd say, "Well, let's pick another spot. Let's make it to that next to that tree." When you do that, that small momentum that builds. But those are mindful moments. That's saying, I'm focusing on this breath, not the next breath. The next breath doesn't matter. And if your mind wanders, then you say, now it's this breath. And focusing on what's happening right now to you and not some fireworks and flames past and future is an antidote that I strongly believe in as an antidote to the suffering of life. I think it also makes you a creative person. I also think it makes you a good scientist because you observe the world around you as it is and not as you wish it were.
It's very cool. It's also funny the story about Navi and the piano because I actually just had a piano recital yesterday.
Oh yeah, how'd it go?
It was pretty good. There was actually one little kid who was like his first recital and he was playing a duet with his mom and his mom kind of like learned piano just to play with her son. So it was cool.
Mhm.
That's so sweet. I grew up playing piano, and it's been such an adventure with Navi being interested in playing piano and learning because i- it's not like starting from scratch, but I've had to, sit down and rework some of the old lessons that I had as a kid. Um, and so we play our duets, and that's, just a different layer of challenge and fun with her that, we're working as a team and we get up there together, and it's not, she's not just by herself. She has to, listen and work as a team to make something sound good. So that's been a really fun thing for us in her piano journey.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So how do
But
you
as
oh,
sorry, I was
you
going to say,
can
but
go ahead.
as a fellow pianist, then you understand that when you started playing, you probably did not like piano very much, and over time, you probably come to enjoy it a lot more as you become more skilled at it. But it's quite difficult learning an instrument, and so I think a really great and people love this uh, in if you want to go to medical school because it demonstrates that you can do something that's really difficult and not very pleasant
For
and
a long period of
for
time
us.
before it actually becomes really fun
Yeah.
and enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I first started, I have an older brother, so he first started playing piano and then I was like, I want to do that too. So I also started taking lessons, but then I didn't like to practice. So it was kind of like I wanted to learn to play piano, but I didn't want to do the journey of getting there. But now it's all worth it because I really enjoy playing the piano.
Yeah, right. Well, Mozart, who wrote his first symphony at 6, had started many years prior to that, even his musical training started many years prior to that. So the learning curve on an instrument is just so incredibly steep. And I think Marley and I always we talk about this in terms of martial arts. That you just get a black belt in a martial art. It doesn't matter what martial art you get a black belt in, because just the process of acquiring a black belt in a martial art gives you some stick to itiveness that you wouldn't otherwise have. The piano is another way to do that.
As Navi's jujitsu instructors call it, a non-quitting
Yes, a
attitude.
non-quitting attitude. Right?
But I think that that's so important. As you were saying, you didn't love to sit down and practice. You just kind of wanted to know how to play, and you just wanted that end goal. And I think that that is so true with so many different things in life. And that's something that, as with the non-quitting attitude and giving her all of these opportunities to learn and to push herself, um, you don't want to do it every day. You don't want to sit down and practice every day. Most days it's actually quite miserable. You don't want to do your homework every day. You don't want to go and be challenged at jujitsu every day. You don't want to go to your dance lessons and have your dance teacher tell you you need to turn out your feet more every day. But so much of those lessons that she's learning now is something that we're trying to give her for the rest of her life, that she understands that non-quitting attitude, that the journey is so much a part of the beauty of the end goal. I think that'll take her really far.
Yes. So, how do you make learning fun and incorporate it into your everyday lives?
For for Navi, you know what, that's a tough one to answer. She loves school and learning so much that we don't have to make it fun for her. She we just went on vacation. She had homework for a week, huge stack of work, and she said, I'm gonna do this right now. I just want to get this off my plate," and she enjoys it. So we haven't really had to try anything to get her to um, uh, we haven't had to try to make learning fun. Um, I would say almost maybe the opposite is that we emphasize that in those moments, like when she's learning piano and she doesn't want to play, or she's going to jujitsu, maybe we do the opposite. Is if she's like, well, I really don't want to go to jujitsu, I always say, well, now we have to go. I think that it's learning is not always going to be fun. It's and especially doing science or the artistic process very often is not fun. It's sometimes quite torturous. But by showing up and like I said, that little bit of momentum over time, you gather enough speed to really move things along. It wasn't always pleasant starting a company. In fact, it was more often than not pleasant because there was so much uncertainty to it. I would say that we try and say like that's part of learning is the struggle of it, and that we you don't have to. Maybe this is more from the Buddhist side, like going back to your previous question, that resistance is the enemy. That if you don't want to do it, then you should just do it and relax into it and find the groove and ride the wave. I think we do that a lot more with Navi because she definitely has the like, oh, I really don't want to practice piano right now, and I understand that you do too. That's practicing is really challenging and it's really difficult and hard. Um, but we have to do it. If you want to learn how to play the piano well, you have to suffer a lot for it, or
Right.
do anything well, art or science.
Well, I think too is like I think about then, okay, so how do we make learning fun for us, right? Because we're on this endless journey of learning and education. Because it comes so naturally to Navi. She is so excited to learn. She loves to read. She's always wants to read new books and um, try new things. I think part of what makes learning fun now is seeing the connections between things that seemed totally disparate earlier on in your education. Um, I think back to medical school when in those preclinical years you were just memorizing some list of facts or you had this PowerPoint slide deck that you had to know for your upcoming exam and there's 120 slides and you're just trying to absorb all of this information and that part is not fun at all. Um, but when you go to into your clinical years or your intern year, when you're really learning how to be a physician and you realize where all of that information kind of fit into the puzzle, um, when you take a step back and you see the forest for the trees, I think that's when the light bulb really goes off and the process starts to become really fun.
Right. So, would you say you have a plan, or are you kind of figuring out parenting as you go?
Joke, you always figure it out as you go. Unless jokingly, Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I feel is applicable to parenthood. If you would have asked me before we had our daughter, what sort of parent I would be, I would have had a really great explanation for how perfect it was going to be. And it's not that way. And I had all sorts of misconceptions. You figure it out as you go. We have broad strokes. We have values, and we have important life lessons that we'd like to impart on her, and skills that we would like to give her, so she can go out into the world and be successful and creative, and succeed in whatever domain that she wants to succeed in. But very often, at least I've found, parenting a child is more like parenting yourself. That if you have, and this again is a Buddhist, a Buddhist principle. I find that I find more fault in my own actions as it relates to my daughter than I do in her actions. Like, if I get frustrated with her, that's my impatience. It's not something that she's done. It's my my reaction to something that's going on. So I very often find that parenting is actually parenting myself, and trying to say, wow, you're really frustrated, or you're having a hard time in this moment. What's going on within you? Than to say, like, do as I say, not as I do. And so both Marlon and I have talked about this, that we find that we change ourselves in the best possible way to be better human beings and examples for Navi. The cleanest example of that is the food you eat. You want your kids to eat whole foods. You want them to eat fruits and vegetables. But if you don't eat fruits and vegetables, then they'll say, well, I had to eat fruits and vegetables, but mom and dad have frozen pizza, so why can't I eat frozen pizza? That lesson doesn't come through. And so if you say, we want you to eat healthy, then everybody must have good food, and everybody eats the same thing. And so that's the example. And that's the way that she understands the world, is that these are the things my family does, and it's not things that she's told to do that other people don't do in the house.
And you mentioned this earlier about how prior to having her, you were under the impression that kids would be a little bit more of a blank slate. I think that you parent the child that you have. Um, and whatever and whoever they really are at their core, you sort of, as a parent, have to adjust your sails. Um, and so, as Matt said, I think that we have some very strong core values, but any sort of plan that we had going into parenthood, I think, has adjusted to custom fit our daughter and her needs.
Yes. How has your experience with your own education shaped your beliefs about an effective approach?
About ineffective approaches, or an effective approach. I actually think that there is no right way. My education is, very often you'll learn things and then they'll be wiped away as we gain new knowledge. And in engineering, they say all models are wrong, some are useful. Um, I don't think that I don't think there necessarily is one single effective approach. In fact, I think a lot of this is made up and it works, and you can make it up a different way and it'll still work. And so it's a really an all roads lead to Rome sort of approach. Um, that the effective approach is the approach that gives you an answer in science. It's not the right answer or the answer you were looking for. It's the answer that exists in nature. And so there are lots of ways to glimpse that, and you just need to find one that's productive. Find an approach that's productive for you. I think I can't remember which scientist said that he wanted to have one single experiment that he did for the rest of his career. It was a neuroscientist, and I think it was the neuroscientist who worked on the orientation of visual field cells with cats, with head-fixed cats. And so he basically just kind of waved this light stick in front of their face in different orientations. And he did this experiment for his entire career. It was one single experiment, and he was able to delineate a lot of how the visual pathways work just by doing that one single experiment. I think that's the dream, is that you want to have one experiment that can give you an abundance of answers, but there are lots of experiments that can do that for you.
Yes.
I don't
So,
No.
know.
what are your thoughts on how to ask good questions and deal with ambiguity or difficult questions slash answers?
That's a great question. We took this it was like a personal assessment or something in medical school, and it was at the end of your first year, and it was your gold standard depression screening tool, anxiety screening tool, and then there was a questionnaire about ambiguity, and they had questions like, if you start a project, do you need to know what the goal of the project is before you start it? um, are you comfortable not knowing the answer to a question? Questions like that. And so I was like, oh yeah, perfect. Ambiguity, ambiguity, ambiguity. I love ambiguity. And then they talked to us a little bit about um, what that means for your specialty. It's sort of like helping you figure out your career goals. And they said, and I had a high ambiguity tolerance because I had answered all of those questions like, nope, don't need to know the goal, don't need to know the answer. We'll just go forward. People with high ambiguity tolerance, they tend to end up in fields like family medicine or psychiatry. These are where you're not running a lot of tests. You're dealing with pretty vague symptoms over a long period of time. You don't always see the answer. Um, and then surgeons are very low on on the ambiguity tolerance test. They tend to not like that. There is and I did a vascular surgery clinical interlude. It was an experience in vascular surgery, and the vascular surgeons, there would be a clot in the femoral artery, and they'd fish up a wire to it and suck it out, and then they'd high five over the operating table, and they'd be like, "We got it," and they'd like show the blood flowing back through the femoral artery, and that was all there was no ambiguity in that. There was a clot, and then there was not a clot anymore. And as it turns out, I learned this about myself. I have pretty low ambiguity tolerance that I don't necessarily like. If there is a project, I would like to know what we're doing here. Um, but in science, it's a little bit different. I think the reason why I find science probably so inspiring is that you're trying to eliminate ambiguity pretty systematically, and you're trying to answer a question because there is ambiguity and it exists, and there's a problem that you're really looking for a solution. I'm not the I'm As it turns out, I try to eliminate ambiguity from a lot of my life, and this was yeah,
Systematically.
quite systematic. Yeah. Maybe Marley would be better at tolerating ambiguity. And how do you deal with that?
Well, I think it's so different in science and medicine. I think in science, ambiguity makes you creative. It makes you get curious. But to answer the question that's in front of you, you have to be very precise and you have to think through every caveat of, if I do the experiment in this way, that's going to tell me, XYZ about this problem. If I shift and do the experiment in a slightly different way, that might change the focus, or that might change the outcome. Or maybe it doesn't change the outcome, but you interpret it differently. And I'm also a surgical resident, so I
Well,
think
it's plastic surgery. So Marley does plastic and reconstructive surgery, and that there's a lot more creativity and ambiguity that goes into that, I think, than the neurosurgery probably, which is
it's true.
much more accurate and precise. And you don't really want to have somebody tinkering around in your brain with a great deal of ambiguity. It does not bode well. So I think she uses ambiguity to her advantage quite frequently.
I think that's true. I think that while we have a certain toolkit in reconstructive surgery, you have to be very creative about how you apply those tools to each patient and each problem. Um, and each one looks a little bit different. There aren't two cases that I can think of in residency that were the same. Um, even if it was the same surgery that we were doing, it was for a very different looking problem. So I do agree. I think that while there is a large focus for me of there is a problem, there is a wound, I need to fix that. And that sounds like quite low ambiguity tolerance. I think that as reconstructive surgeons, you have to be very creative, and a lot of times go into the operating room not knowing exactly how you're going to fix the problem, just knowing that you will.
And I'll add from a scientific perspective that ambiguity is very often your friend. If you don't if you can you, you can have an idea about the if you're running a scientific experiment about what the experiment will be. But nature has a funny way of telling you that you're definitely wrong. And if you're not open to being wrong and seeing something, seeing it in a way that you might not have expected it, and being able to interpret that, you're gonna miss the universe telling you something in a very real way. Not all the time. There are just experiments that go sideways, but ambiguity is your friend a lot of times in science, as that ambiguity represents space of represents the space of the unknown. That's where you're trying to push out the boundaries of knowledge.
Yes. So, if Navi asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, what do you say?
Saying I don't know, I don't know that there's any. There must be a parent who's out there like I know it all.
No,
They,
everything.
I'm sure that exists somewhere, but that seems like such an aberrance. I don't know. I don't know why you would do that. Your kids will ask you questions about all sorts of things that you wouldn't know the answer to, and you'd mislead them if you didn't tell them that we should probably look it up and learn about it. For the first part of Navi's life, she went to a Montessori school, which addresses this in a very well-known way. Where if a kid asks a question, they say, "Why is the sky blue?" They all we're all going on a field trip outside, and we're all going to learn about it. And that's what she did for the first part of her educational experience was, why is the grass green? I don't know. Grab a magnifying glass and let's get out there and let's go see. And there is some of that. Navi will say, "Hey, what's it?" Where she wanted to go to Morocco. I think she said something about going to Morocco. We had watched um, something um, Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain, and she had seen something from Morocco, and she said, "Well, I'd like to go there. What's in Morocco?" And I said, "I don't know. I've never been to Morocco, but we should go." And so I think that's probably a Montessori. That's basically the Montessori approach, and she's quite familiar with that.
I think that is also just kind of how we are as parents in general. We don't approach parenthood as our lives and careers are separate from our daughter. It's a journey that we're all on together as a family. Um, Navi joins me very frequently at plastic surgery events. She's very engaged with what I'm doing even day to day. Um, and so, in that way, I think as a whole family, we're just very engaged in all of us kind of moving forward, expanding our horizons, everybody's education. So, if one of us asks a question, we're all looking it up together.
I think the other thing that we share with her quite openly is we share not only our successes, but we also share our failures. And so if if we had a in-service exam and it didn't go as well as we had hoped, we tell her that. We say, wow, this test really kicked my butt. Because she'll experience that too. Or if, we had an in-service exam and it went really well, and we said, "Hey, this year we really crushed it. We knocked it out of the park this year." So she shares those successes and those failures, and then patient care always is some mix of success and failure, not necessarily failure in the sense of physician making a mistake, but there are just some things that are intractable that you can't do anything about, and that's a failure of modern medicine. That's the limit of it. So we share those things and we share the successes as well. So she can always ask questions. It's okay to not know things, and it's okay to fail at things. And in fact, failure is the probably the greatest teacher of all. So we share our failures all the time. So she doesn't think her parents are superhuman. So she just knows that we're all on the same journey together,
Yeah.
and we are not superhuman, regardless of what I think.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. That was really amazing conversation, and I learned so much.
Great. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for taking the time to do this. This was great. It's always a pleasure to chat with you in this way.